Hi there, Zam here for NerdTube, and I have a particular set of skills, and they'll be used to review the Taken Trilogy. Back in 2008, when I first saw Taken, I was absolutely blown away by this film. This film, in my opinion, is almost like an earlier version of what we see now in action movies when it comes to stuff like John Wick, for instance. But this time around, it's played by Liam Neeson, who is going to Paris to save his daughter, who has been kidnapped by some terrible people involved in sex trafficking and prostitution. And he has a particular set of skills. He's a military guy, and he's obviously a senior guy as well, so he's got loads of experience. And using his experience of not just only being a badass in fighting techniques, but also espionage and stuff like that, he quickly uncovers, the sort of ring and leads and people involved in all of this shit happening in Paris to end up finding his daughter. Loads of great action scenes and really tense moments and interesting characters. Beautifully shot, well acted, very tense, very disturbing at times as well. This is a brilliant, dark action film, and it's a cult hit for a lot of people. So it's a cult classic as well, and that's why the first Taken movie gets a solid 10 out of 10 for me, because not only is it a great action flick, it also ended up being a movie that revitalized and took Liam Neeson's career in a totally different direction. I mean, he has done sort of actiony movies, you know, prior to Taken. Obviously, we saw him as Qui-Gon Jinn in Star Wars, and he's done stuff like Rob Roy and stuff like that. But once he made this particular movie, he played that, particular set of skill character pretty much for the rest of his career. Unfortunately, the movies that followed Taken, in this trilogy were definitely not as good. I think the worst of this trilogy is Taken 2. And this film is set in Istanbul. And one of the members of the cartel, which Liam Neeson's character took out in the first film, well, his father in the second movie wants revenge. And they go to Istanbul to get that revenge against the Mills family, because in this movie, Brian Mills and his ex-wife, who was in the first movie, now kind of his wife again in the second movie, as well as their daughter, they're all together, and they're getting fucked over in the second movie, and it's up to Brian Mills to use his particular set of skills again to save the day. Unfortunately, this movie is just nowhere near as good as the first. Everything about this movie feels low budget, and the funny thing is that the first Taken movie is a low budget movie, but low budget movies can be fantastic. Sometimes you don't even care about the budget being low. You just know you're watching something really good, and that's what Taken was. Unfortunately, Taken 2 feels like a shitty low budget movie. It feels like something where you see the current day Steven Seagal in, not Liam. You shouldn't be somebody like Liam Neeson involved in something as horrendous as this. It pretty much wants to follow the same or a similar playbook to the first movie, with obviously some significant differences, where this time around the whole family are together, being pursued by these motherfuckers, and on this particular occasion the wife gets kidnapped, and it's up to Brian Mills and Kim to get the wife back. But yeah, like I said, it's pretty much wants to be like Taken, but Taken 2 is just so poorly done, and the action scenes are just awful. They're nauseating because there's just lots of fast editing, choppy chops. There's no decent one takes. It's not well executed. It's not directed by the same guy who did the first movie. The first movie was directed by Pierre Morel, but in the second movie we have Olivier Megaton. It almost sounds like Megatron, and I don't know who this guy is, but he shouldn't be involved in these films, because his eye just didn't do this movie any justice. Lo and behold, obviously, as this is a trilogy, Brian Mills does end up saving the day and getting his family out of Dodge. But regardless, it's just such a shit film. I give Taken 2 a 2, because it's just terrible. When you have a 10 in the first movie and then you come out with this shit in the second, I was surprised they even did a trilogy, to tell you the truth. And unfortunately, it took me 11 years to watch the third movie because the second one was so bad. I had no interest in Taken 3, but I watched it today. And I will say this, Taken 3 is better than Taken 2. And this film is set in LA. And one thing I do like about all three of these movies is that they all have significant different settings: Paris, Istanbul, and Los Angeles in the third one. And and unfortunately, like some of the I don't want to say unfortunately, but the incidences from the first two movies, they don't come back to haunt the characters in the third one. It's a totally different scenario in the third one. And I wish that wasn't the case in a way, because the sex trafficking ring cartels and all of that shit, they could, they're bigger than what Liam Neeson's character took out in the first two films. And I thought maybe there'll still be reminiscence of it in the third movie, but that wasn't the case. Maybe it's a good thing that these motherfuckers don't come back in the third film and we get some different villains. But how this movie pans out is that Lenore, the now ex-wife again of Brian Mills, she's dead. She gets killed in Brian's home, and so now Brian is being blamed for the murder of his ex-wife. Now the daughter doesn't believe that's the case. She knows that her father's a good guy, and she will never believe that her father killed her mother. But because Brian Mills has been accused of this, he's now on the run. So this film is pretty much like The Fugitive to a degree. Very much like The Fugitive, to tell you the truth. And Forrest Whitaker is definitely playing that Tommy Lee Jones role as he's trying to catch Liam Neeson. But Liam Neeson, Brian Mills, he's always one step ahead because he's got that particular set of skills. And when he starts to try to uncover what the hell's going on and who did actually kill his wife and all of that, there are some interesting story beats and story moments and a good twist here and there. So it does become a little bit interesting from that particular perspective. And the action scenes are a little bit better. I would say a little bit. It can still be a bit choppy here and there, and it's just not as well executed as the first movie, where you really see how it's all done. But one thing I do like about the third film is that now the character of Brian Mills on this occasion, he's just a little bit older than he was by the first movie, and because of that, he's not as good a fighter as he once was. Obviously, he's still a very experienced man, but his body's letting him down. You see at one point he needs some chocolate because his blood sugar's low and all of that. And with his daughter being pregnant as well, which he finds out later on, he's going to be a granddad. So he shows you that he's not a young man at all. However, overall, this is still a better movie than the second one, and I have to give this movie a slightly higher rating, obviously, than the second one. I would probably say I don't know how generous I want to be, because it's still not a great film, but it is better than 2. And when I went into this movie, I was expecting it to be really shit, and going in with that mindset, and then feeling that it wasn't that shit at all, might make me give a rating that a film like this doesn't deserve. But I'm going to do I'm going to go with how I feel anyway. And I was going to go with a 5, but I'm actually going to go with a 6. And that could be sacrilege for some people. But yeah, I go with a 6 because I think the story in this film is actually a little bit better, and it's good to see Brian Mills have some friends in who help him out, because he's obviously on the run, but being like this guy with the set of skills and knowing some other military colleagues who are able to help him out, they do, so you can basically find out what the fuck's going on and who actually killed his wife, and uncover all these twists and turns, and they make the story a lot more palatable. The action scenes are a little bit better, definitely. Still not as good as the first one. Both the second film and the third film will never be as tense and disturbing as the first movie. And not just that, but also like I said, the first movie cinematography was just so much better. The editing, just the look of the film was just so much better. It did not feel like a low budget movie, while the second and third one do feel like they have budget restrictions. It does almost feel like that Hallmark level at times when you're looking at it with the second and third movie, and it makes you wonder why can't they apply what they did in the second and third movie to the first one when it comes to the visual aesthetic, because the first movie just looks so great. Regardless, I gave the film a 6. It is better. It does tie itself up with a little bow at the end, and that's the end of the Taken trilogy. And I think that's a good thing to do. I think the family's had enough shit the Mills has, so leave them alone and let them just live out the rest of their lives in peace. It's just a shame that such a phenomenal movie like Taken has just two below average to average sequels that followed it, because a film like Taken deserves better. But then again, sequels never tend to be as good as the original, and Taken is a prime example of that. But my God, are the sequels not that good? Then again, you could say that about films like The Matrix. I always thought The Matrix was a phenomenal, groundbreaking movie, and the sequels were nowhere near as good as that. But there you go. Anyway, let's not go on a tangent about that. These are my opinions of the Taken trilogy. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to NerdTube, the greatest social media channel you never heard of. Take care. Bye bye.